So many paints, just so many. I mean, we got Army Painter, we have Citadel, I have Vallejo. I mean, there's so many different styles of paints. You have traditional paints, you have dry paints, you have speed paints, you have contrast paints, just so many paints. And it's daunting. It's daunting to know what paint you need, what paint you should start with. What color should you start with? Should you get into contrast? Should you get into dry brushing paint? Well, that's what we're going to discuss about Hobby Time today. Paints. Welcome, everyone. Hobby Time episode number 3, the important episode, paint. We've discussed getting into the games, figuring out which one is best for you, expanding your game into those models of the line or some other models. But a lot of those models are going to be unpainted, gray, or blue, or reds, or whatever they are, plastic. So we clearly don't want to play with gray, plastic, or resin. It's boring. This hobby allows us, of course, to paint up our models the way we want them to look. Red Space Marines, green and blue Tau, or whatever you want your models to be. But where do you start when getting into paints? I mean, like I said, here is my entire paint collection. At the top, I have all my Army Painters. I got a few Vallejo right here. I got Citadel. I have like all my speed paints and some contrast paints and also like stuff to do basing and everything. And it's like, this is a lot of paint. But do you need all this paint yourself? Do you need an entire shelf of paint? Not mentioning that we also have to talk about rattle cans. I mean, I have rattle cans all the way down here at the bottom. I got rattle cans over there. I got rattle cans everywhere. I have airbrush paint. I mean, where do we start? Where do we begin? Easy enough. The primary colors. Folks, the easiest colors that we have to us are the primary colors. The primary colors on a color wheel. Your reds, your blues, your yellows, and then you can even get into some greens and some purples and stuff like that. That's what you should start with. A color wheel, a basic color wheel that we find in like first grade. That's the basic colors you should start with. Not overly complicated different colors of black. Not overcomplicated different colors of purple or greens. Just the real colors. That's what you should get. Just some simple colors from the wheel. Some simple color schemes. So your reds, your greens, your blues, your yellows, your purples, your black, and probably not your white for your first time. White's weird to get on a model, and white looks really strange a lot of times in your models. But those primary colors are what you should work with. And as you slowly work around your models, maybe you want to get in some browns, maybe you want to get in some other colors, and then slowly build up your colors. But where should you start? Should you get yourself a big old color set? Like Army Painter releases a large collection set with a bunch of colors, some shades, and all of that. And I'd say, no, you don't need that. You don't need all that. What you need is the primary colors and probably some dark tone shades or some shades that are that specific color, like red shades or blue shades or purple shades or green shades. And Army Painter does actually make those. They do actually have some shades that are just pure green and just some pure blues and stuff like that. That's easy. And all you need for highlights, just take another color of blue, a lighter color of blue, or don't even highlight for your first model. Just get a base coat down and shade it and call that good. I mean, that's battle ready right there. Don't go parade ready for your first few models. If you feel comfortable with getting in there and highlighting, then go right ahead and do that. But for your first few models, just be battle ready, which just means getting your base coats down, shading it, and then you're done putting it on the base and you can go. Now, of course, I did mention airbrush paints in there, but we're not going to go too far into airbrush paints because I don't want this to get bogged down with you trying to go out and suddenly buying yourself an airbrush. It's an expensive purchase, but it's a good purchase once you're ready to get an airbrush. For now, there are airbrush specific paints and they are very, very nice as well, but for your first few models and maybe your first set of models, don't get an airbrush. You can find some nice airbrushes on Amazon, and we'll do a later hobby time video actually talking about an airbrush and what my thoughts are on airbrushing altogether. But yeah, and of course we did mention rattle cans. Primer rattle cans. I use this stuff a lot. This is how you prime all your models, and multiple companies produce multiple different rattle cans. Games Workshop, I think Vallejo does it. Army Painter, which I'm holding, does it. But I think Army Painter is probably one of the nicer ones because they actually have a 100% match. So it means if you get a black, you can match that with the black paint that they have. It's the same for blues, greens, everything. So it's very nice to have that. Our Citadel is the same way. There are some paints that tie to some of their primers, but I don't think it's tied one-to-one like Army Painter likes to state one-to-one. And I'm not so sure about Vallejo's. I've never really used the Vallejo's primers. I'm only now getting into Vallejo paint thanks to Team Yankee. But overall, that's really where paint belongs. Just start out with a few basic colors and a shade that really matches that color. So a red shade for red, a blue shade for blue, a green shade for green, any really like dark tone shade for black. Or what you can do is Black Templar as well, which is a contrast paint, which actually works pretty nice. But if you're looking to get really quick models on the board, contrast paints are really nice, and they're extremely easy to use. You just take them right out of the pot, you stick it on a palette, and you stick it to the model. That's it. You don't have to do anything else. It just goes right on the model, immediately highlights it, and congratulations, that also gets you immediately parade ready for, or should I say, battle ready. That gets you immediately battle ready for your model, so you can immediately just put them on bases, get them onto the tabletop. And those are really nice. I don't really use a lot of contrast or speed paints in my own personal painting experience. I usually like to just use base coat painting, followed by, of course, shades and then highlights. And of course, don't worry, we're going to talk about the steps for painting models in a future episode. So, for this episode, I know this one's not exactly long, but there's not really much to talk about when it comes to paint. It really does come down to which brand is the best. I can't really answer that for you. It really answers on who do you think is the best. Have you seen people use Army Paper? Have you seen people use Citadel? Have you seen people use Vallejo? Have you seen the amount of other third-party paint providers out there? There's a lot of paint providers. I think like there's a lot of third-party, like Goblin I think is one. I know the guy that used to paint for Games Workshop has his own line now. There's just so many third-party painters out there. And everyone's going to talk about everything that's nice and bad about all the paints. Personally, I have been really enjoying Army Painter, and I still enjoy Citadel as well, and I am getting a nice like for Vallejo. But truth be told, if I was going to go back to paints, I think I would stay more in the Army Painter line just because I find dropper bottles are just much easier than Citadel's little containers where you have to dig the paint out and slap it onto a wet palette, which isn't always fun. And I do like the dropper bottle to shake, and not mentioning that now they even come with little balls you can buy that put in your Army Painter dropper bottles to shake them up so the little ball agitates the acrylics a little easier than you just shaking. But yeah, it kind of just matters what you want. Now, yes, you can transfer Citadel paints into dropper bottles. There are plenty of YouTube videos out there that will help you do it. But overall, I have been finding myself more liking Army Painter than I like Citadel. Maybe because I just happen to use more Army Painter now than I use Citadel paints. I still like my Citadel paints. I do like their layer paints. But personally, you wouldn't want to get into your layer paints until, again, you're feeling more comfortable with highlighting. Once you get into highlighting, then a whole menagerie of like dry brush paint opens up to you. All the layer paints open up to you. The ability to highlight models, stuff like that. And don't worry, we will go into a hobby time episode discussing highlighting because I think it needs its own episode. So for paints, don't buy a big set of hundreds of paints that you may never even use or may never want. First, just go get the basic colors like the rainbow has. Those are some real great basic colors. Look at a color wheel and find out that red's across from green or blue, across from yellow. That's the kind of stuff, and kind of figure out that contrast style. Pick up basically those paints, work with them, and then pick up shades that go with those paints, and then of course, paint up your model, shade it, and have it immediately ready for the battlefield. Immediately ready to go on the tabletop. Immediately ready to play after you do the base, of course. And basing material in its own right it's kind of all over the place. Citadel releases their own basing material. But you can also just do basing material by sticking like some Elmer's glue on a base and then dipping it in some sand or sprinkling some rocks or grabbing stuff from outside and sticking it to a base. And you could do that as well. Heck, most people do that for their own models, and then they prime the model in that color, all of it together in that base while it's on the base, and then they paint the stuff they put on the base. So I like the Citadel basing material. I don't really do my own like custom bases, but I do like the basing material. And of course, if you want to do more into basing, we'll be talking about it probably for a later hobby time, but there's little things you can stick on bases and stuff like that. But yeah. Start out with just the basic colors on a color wheel. Get the shades that match those colors. If you want to do some highlighting, just get a color that is either a higher gray, a higher blue or lighter blue or a darker blue. Probably want a lighter blue as you go up in the stages of highlighting. But you can also re-highlight with the colors you have, because a lot of times what shades will do is they'll darken down the color. So you can actually take the color you use to re-highlight the model. So that's an easy way just to do some quick dirty highlights. And of course, there is dry brushing as well to highlight as well. And I think dry brushing is an art to utilizing it correctly, but it's a very nice, great time saver. So that's it for today's hobby time about paints. Not really a lot to talk about. There's not much to talk about when it comes to painting. This episode is more or less just a discussion of where you should even start when getting into paints. We'll have a second hobby time later on talking, of course, about the painting process where you take those paints and you stick them onto a model. But of course, you got to pick up those paints, and this is what this episode's about. Pick up a primer. It could be white or black. That's as simple as you probably need to do it. Pick up the basic colors off the color wheel, shades that go with the colors you picked up, and either some lighter colors for the color of the main colors on the color wheel, or you can easily go do some dirty highlighting with the colors you have, or get a simple dry paint as well. There's a lot out there. By the way, you can actually use any paint as a dry paint. Again, all you need to do is put it on your palette, get your dry brush, put it on, scrape off the paint until it's very, very minimal, and then brush that on. You can actually do that as a dry brush as well. So you don't actually have to take just the dry paint to put on your model. And then of course, you'll be battery ready. Of course, whether or not, however you want to do your bases, whether you want to do the old style where you used to just put some glue on the base, stick it in some sand, and then congratulations, it's done. Or maybe you want to use some technical paints to get, of course, the basing that you want for your model. Just a first rule about basing here on this painting video, whatever you do for your base, keep that true for all your models. Models that don't have the same base look kind of odd. So whatever base you do, keep it the same for all your models across your line. But let me know down in the comments, what paints are you wanting to use? What paints do you think about using? Have you seen some third-party paints that you yourself are going to use? Do you think about just using contrast paints or speed paints instead of just the base coat stuff? Because what contrast does, it actually removes the base coat and the shading step altogether. So it's just a quick, immediate step up into highlighting. Let me know down all in the comments below. And while you're letting me know down in the comments, actually let me know what models you're thinking about painting up first. What models do you have primed and ready to go? What models are you ready to get that paint on and make that really, really cool? If you do have some first-time models yourself that you want to share with me, go ahead and share them in the comments. I'd love to see some models. You can also share it on my Twitter page as well. That is linked on the channel. But anyways, while of course you're commenting all of that, make sure to subscribe to the channel, make sure to like the video, and make sure to ring the bell so you can notify when my videos go live for you. And we'll see you here next time on episode 4 of Hobby Time here at Mama Dragon's Miniatures.